We are back from outer space. What's going on? Christian, how's it going? Everything good?
Yeah, good. We're just looking for some new places, and we were out in the country. So I'm broadcasting you from a very fine Mexican establishment.
Hey, it
Uh,
works. Actually, you got like
yes.
that's nice little background thing going on and
Yeah.
everything. It's
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
nice, nice. All right, so
But down
ladies
here
and
near
gentlemen,
Benson, yeah.
sorry, say again.
Near Benson.
Okay, got it. Okay, that's not too far out. That's not too far out. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk about patriotism. It's like in today's language, that's like a dirty word for some reason, right? It's like it's got a lot of negative rep. But the first thing I thought of when I put this together was how a couple weeks ago when Elon Musk had his like rockets go down, right, and they exploded because I think Flight 7 and Flight 8 didn't go very well. Like each had problems, which of course is just part of the game for Elon Musk, because he's just supposed to throw as many things up as he can, figure out the problems as fast as possible, and then just iterate, right? So it's supposed to explode, and yet people were like on the left, they were like cheering that there was failure, right? Like they were like rooting for failure, like rooting for American rockets to go down, like happy that Elon couldn't make it work, like, which I'm not sure exactly what they were expecting to
But you
happen
get
anyway.
data. You get data from tests. They're not man launches, so it's not like success was going to put us on the Mars anyway. It's like
Right,
you just want it
absolutely,
down.
yeah. Like the best case scenario was it went up and came back down, and honestly, we probably learned far more from the failure, quote unquote failure, than the success. Have you ever heard that like classic? There's like a classic Thomas Edison quote where they say, he said they tried like 2,000 times to make the incandescent light bulb. They say, how did that failure hit you? He said, I didn't fail 2,000 times. I just found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Right.
Yeah.
And so, of course, Elon Musk is just throwing these things up there. Meanwhile, people are literally cheering for him to lose. And that got me thinking, like, what does it really mean to have patriotism, right? To have love of country. And I think that's what it is. I think that there's something deep in us, in human beings, ingrained in us to have a love of the homeland that we were born into, the love of the land that we owe allegiance to, and the unity that brings among all like-minded people that have that same love and affection for this homeland. And I could not, for the life of me, find a single negative thing to say about patriotism. Now, I could find some negative things to say about a word that it's often confused for, which is nationalism, right? And even nationalism isn't really all that bad. It's just something that people like, will confuse those two words, and then they'll use the very worst version of nationalism and then throw it at people like it's a slur, like it's kind of like adjacent to racism. And I'm like, no, not at all.
You're a nationalist. Yeah. I
Right.
guess like there was an old form of people who were monarchists who right supported the right, and the term patriot really became part of the lexicon in English with the rise of America, right? That we weren't devoted, we weren't saying long live the king. It was to this idea of a nation,
Right.
right? Or not even like an ethnicity too, right? So multiple, it's like Vive la France is sort of an ethnicity, but it was a patriot to this idea, right? This experiment, and I think patriotism is deeply within "Make America Great Again," right?
Yes.
Is inherently
100%.
in a love for America and a drive to make it great again, but it's also it's sort of like let's put our house in order first, right?
Yes.
That's one of the things Jordan Peterson is big. It's like before you can start telling the world how to do their things, having opinions on. Maybe you should clean your room. Maybe
That's
you
it.
should like get your life. Maybe you should get a life. And so it's sort of like let's get America in order first, right? I'm putting America first, and then we'll see about what we can help. And this is an advent to the globalists, right? So ever since World War II, there's been a growing strain of people that want to globalize, and especially meaning take from the strongest, America being the strongest country, and take from them to, create this global world order, but basically then put America under this rather than under that. And by doing that, they've sort of put other countries ahead of our own
Yep.
interests, rebuilt economies at the expense of ours, things like that to try to build up other places like that, and have tried to any type of love of, hey, maybe we should try to get America right, or I love America more than someplace I've never been and may never go to ever.
Right.
They tried to sort of demonize that patriotism.
Right.
But again, and especially with Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump has an off-putting personality, and people have started to, but he loves America, right? Hugging the flag, he loves America. He's a unrepentant patriot, and so their dislike of Donald Trump's personality has made them double down on their dislike of patriotism.
Right.
I think that's a problem right now, right? Like you said, there should be nothing negative, but
right.
they're sort of equating the dislike of a personality to a quality that should be admirable.
Right. Absolutely. And, and of course, to be fair, there's always going to be extremes on both sides, right? There's definitely a person out there, right, who has these like love blinder goggles on, right, where like America can do no wrong, right? And anytime you would criticize America, that person's just kind of like ignoring it, right? And like can't improve because they're using it as like a hindering factor, right? Or they'll like cross, love of country with like love of a particular leader, right? Which, don't get me wrong, because love of the leader of a country is part of patriotism. But like, it's different to love the presidency than to love a particular president and think that that's like the whole of patriotism, because then you might get lost the moment that president isn't in office anymore, right?
Well, yeah, a patriot would want the president to succeed, even if he's not in their party. It's like, all right, that you would imagine like when Ronald Reagan lost the nomination to Gerald Ford, he wanted Gerald Ford to succeed because he was the president at the time. And when Jimmy Carter succeeded, right, very different party and very different policies for America, he hoped that America would succeed, and that even though he disagreed with these policies, he hoped, even though he thought they were wrong, that somehow they would succeed, that God would make them work somehow, right?
Right.
And obviously they didn't. And we needed some change. But you're not weeping when America fails. You're hoping, look, like you're hoping, all right, maybe there are three paths to success here. And maybe I don't think that one will get there, but we hope that Joe Biden can get there. And when he doesn't, you're like, okay, right? We kind of disagreed with that, but we still prayed. And it's when Bill Maher, I think one of the most unpatriotic things I've heard, and he's now talking about patriotism as an important thing. He was hoping the economy of the United States would tank, so that Trump would lose his reelection in 2020. Right? He's like, this economy is so good. 2019, early 2020 economy is so good. It was like, there's no way Trump's going to lose. And I dislike him so much. Because I am sorry to say, but I want America to go into a recession so that people will vote this bum out. And that's indefensible to me. I think we should always want America to succeed, even if it makes another party look good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what patriotism is, right? It's like, it's being able to perceive things in the most positive light, right? And that isn't to say that you're ignoring the negatives, right? They're still there. It's just you're using your, so like one thing that I thought about was my marriage, my ex-marriage, right? So like I would come in, for example, this is a great story, right? I would come in, and this happened to me in my marriage all the time, stuff like this, right? And I'd come in and I'd look at my wife and I'd say, wow, dear, you look lovely today, right? And of course, she being a woman, she would say, oh, what, I don't look lovely every day? And I'm like, oh my God. Right? It's like you can't win, right? Like that's the kind of thing that you want to avoid. And that's the kind of thing that patriotism is geared towards with regard to a nation, right? Like I should never have people like just trying to see the failure in America. And here's one key way that you can know that you're falling prey to that too, is if you're like you're gaming out the failures before the results are in, right? So like a perfect example is like these tariffs, right? And I'm not a fan of tariffs, right?
Yeah.
I've been very vocal against them from the beginning, on principle, but I don't know what they're going to do. Nobody does. Literally nobody. Even people who went to school for like years studying tariffs still are going to have no clue what these things are going to do because nobody's ever used them this way, right? Ever. And meanwhile, everybody's like, oh, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. I'm like, how could you possibly know that? What you should be thinking is maybe it'll work, right? I don't think it's going to work.
Hopefully
Maybe.
it'll work. I don't think it's a long shot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like maybe this is a Hail Mary, or maybe, I have no idea what Trump's actual plan is, but maybe he's got this on lock. Who knows? Right. And it's one thing to like not have any confidence in a person. That's fine. You don't have to have perfect confidence in every person that graces the office. I certainly didn't. Right. Like I definitely didn't have confidence in Biden. He was practically dead. And yet I still was like every time he would pass a bill or something, I'd be like, let me see what the positives are. Right. Let me see if I can work this into, something that might possibly come out on top. And, a lot of the times it didn't. And yet I was still optimistic. And that's where we ought to be, right? Every time we look at something in America, it should be, how can I make this work? How can I make this, to be into a result that's positive? Hey, Tanya, how you doing? Welcome aboard. And that's where I'm at. Now,
yeah, a patriot would want
about
America to be better. They would want, like, what can I do? How can I contribute to make America a little better? And it's a small contribution, and it's Kennedy put it right: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But it's the ultimate, like, we can't all be president. We can't all be government workers, right? That's an unfair threshold, but we can find some way to be pro-American and help out our communities.
100%. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is the difference between patriotism and nationalism, right? Because as I said, nationalism isn't really a bad thing either, but it's used with a very negative connotation these days. So I wanted to be clear about how we define these terms, right? What patriotism is just love for country, right? That's it. That's all there is to it. And there is never anything wrong with loving your country, ever. Now, what nationalism is, in contrast, is love of country first and before other countries, right? And that's a key difference. Now, there's still nothing wrong with that in the abstract. The only trouble comes in when you get to the point where you're willing to ignore shortcomings for that love, right? Where you're so blinded by this love where you won't find the ways to improve anymore, right? Like, and one thing that it's really important to be clear about: there is no such thing as a country without a checkered past, right? There's no such thing as a country that doesn't have blemishes, right? And
a colorful history, yes.
Yes. And the first thing that comes up when we start talking about patriotism, people like, how could you be happy about this nation, because of slavery and because of Jim Crow and because of, manifest destiny and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yes, but every single thing that you're talking about is a constant among every nation that's basically ever existed ever. The thing that sets us apart isn't those negatives, because everyone has those negatives. The thing that sets us apart is the outrageous positives that we've achieved despite those negatives, right? And even sometimes involving those negatives, right? For example, slavery is something every nation has had since the dawn of time. Only America and UK were able to solve that problem, right? Out of all the nations in the world, we were the only two that tamped it down, stopped the Atlantic slave trade, decided that all men were created equal. Heaven forbid we go in that direction, right? And that faced considerable pressure from both sides. And hey, Anthony, how you doing? Welcome aboard. And so that's one of the things that I just want to impress upon people, is that the negatives in a nation don't make it so that you shouldn't be patriotic ever, ever.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you forget about them. You don't ignore them. You still want to improve upon your past, but that's not saying that you had a blemish in the past is never an excuse not to love your country.
Yeah, I think nationalism has historically been villainized because um, it will be used in propagandists to whip up fervor for war, right? Especially in Europe, right? I if you've read the book All Quiet on the Western Front, written by a
Yeah.
German, um, and it's really nihilistic about like what the freak are we fighting for, right? What happens, right? The soldiers when they're told it back at home and by their teachers, the elder, how great this is, love for their country, nationalism is whipped up. This thing, they get out that all that's gone. They don't hate their enemy. They just want to stay alive, right? The whole point is not to win glory for their country or to succeed their ideology over another's. It's just to not die today. And
Yes.
and so so the nationalist veneer, the lies sort of wear off, and they're like,
Right.
look, we got no real problem with the French. Uh, in World War One, you're like, why are we trying to kill them? It's just so I can stay alive. And so, ever since then, that's sort of been nationalism has been questioned when it's come to martial, right, or military build up, right? And whether it's being used to make you hate people that you really have no reason to hate. Um,
Right.
and so, but I think ultimately what we have to we shouldn't be ashamed to put America first, right? To say, look,
Not at
we
all.
have some things we've got to put in order. We've been putting driving things out or spending a lot of time and energy in other parts of the world. It's time to bring some of that energy and focus back to some of our communities, underserved communities here, regions, and uh, and not just be like, "Oh, America's strong enough; they'll succeed anyway." Right?
You're right.
It's not inevitable. Success is not inevitable. Right? We can fail. It takes work. It takes planning. Right? And I think that's
Thank you,
um,
Tanya. So,
so every
Tanya said,
country can love their entire world. Oh, and this is all right. So this is the type of thing we've talked about how Trump wants to expand. Right?
yes.
Right. So he's offered like Canada if you want to become the 51st state, Greenland, Panama. He's not
Get on
talking about
board.
invading or doing that through martial means. And one of the major inhibitors to that, to Puerto Rico, is that patriotism. They don't want to give up, an idea of their country as independent, right? They want, and right, we who are part of the United States realize every state can have their own identity, and
Yep.
we can be part of the whole. You don't lose your whole by joining the United States. And that's a new nationalism. It's like you can come here and bring your patriotism, bring your love of your country with you. You don't have to discard that,
Right.
but you do need to see that your government or this American experiment is really unique and wonderful, and try to support that. But I think patriotism sometimes or nationalism is inhibiting people that can't see the benefit of joining the United States,
Right.
right? Just because of certain nationalistic pride things.
Right. And so one big thing I want to talk about today too is that there's a huge difference between putting America first and putting America only, right? Like those are
Yeah,
two, like
that's
those
true.
are
Yeah.
miles apart. And so like one of the things that people have the tendency to forget is anytime there's any kind of pressure for America to like focus on itself for a little while to put its own affairs in order, they automatically think that comes with neglect for everyone else. No. It's quite the opposite. As a matter of fact, plenty of times us reaching out to our friends is the way that we help ourselves, and sometimes not, right? Like there's definitely times for both, and we need to be cognizant of that. One of the problems that we run into in today's world is that there are a lot of like global or international endeavors that are actually antithetical to the American experiment, but people don't really realize it, right? And people are sometimes willing to
Like, give some
sacrifice.
specifics. Give
Sure.
us
Like
specifics.
for example, the Paris Climate Accords would be a good example, right? The WHO is another good example. These are what the biggest things that's going on with these globalist agendas that is antithetical to America is that America needs to have this decentralized government, and they also need to maintain core freedoms within the Constitution. And the problem with a lot of these globalist agendas is they have mandates that supersede the United States Constitution. Like there are situations like where the WHO, for example, wanted to implement a scenario where they were like, basically they could declare pandemics, and then every time they declared a pandemic, they could basically enforce certain procedures in our nation and every nation that's under them to operate. And the thing is, like, the problem is, like, it doesn't take a genius to just like take one look at our Constitution, one look at what they're asking us to do, and say, no, we can't. I'm sorry, because that violates our freedom of assembly. It violates our freedom of da 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 da. And so that's the problem, right? Like we can't kowtow to those globalist agendas if they are antithetical to the American experiment. Now, there's plenty
especially
others
because globalists don't answer to voters, right? They're not accountable, right? We're not, right? No taxation without representation. Certainly, no vaccines without representation. No forced medical procedures, right? And so, but the globalists, right, just feel like if they can transcend nations or transcend patriotism, then they can have all the power over everyone. And so, patriotism becomes an important stopgap against that very dangerous ideology.
Yes. Yeah. Another huge one, like huge. And I can't overstate how incredibly important this is. And for all of you guys out there, if there's one thing that you take away from me, like at all, I swear to God, do not let central bank digital currencies come into play. Because if you do that, we will be signing over every little transaction that we make for the rest of our lives to a globalist agenda, probably the International Monetary Fund or something like that, some global bank system where we will not have the power, not even America will have the power, and they will literally be able to stop us from buying anything for any reason, whether it's because they think we've already eaten too much food for the month, or because they don't approve that particular like nutrient, or because we were trying to pay a kid across the street for to mow the lawn and we've already made too many private party like there's just so many different reasons, or they don't want us to have guns and they're not in line with America's Second Amendment. Like I cannot tell you how dangerous central bank digital currencies are, and it's one of those things where like I'm happy to reach out to help the rest of the world to be part of one big happy global family, but only and I cannot reiterate enough, only if it doesn't mean I sacrifice my essential freedoms to do so. And that's
privacy and freedom is really what America is all about. Like in every other country, government has always sought more and more control over their populace, and Americans know we want a constitution that will limit what the government can do, that will keep us out of our lives. And so, yeah, I'm with you that something like that can now allow government control over aspects of our life that are not part of the liberty experiment, right?
right.
And yeah, so yeah, maybe a constitutional amendment banning that or something like
Yeah.
that.
God, I'd really love that actually. And it's like I said, that isn't to say that we can't see eye to eye. Now, here's the other thing that I'd ask everybody to ask themselves at home, and that is, if you had to today live under a governmental and economic system, you had to pick some nation from around the world whose system you'd want to live under that matches the United States constitutional freedoms that we have, and would be the best system for you. Like, which one would it be? Because golly, I couldn't put myself under China. I couldn't put myself under Russia, right? Like I couldn't put myself under any one of a dozen dictators. I couldn't put myself under the European Union because they're too stringent and they violate a lot of my constitutional freedoms, and their taxes are too high and things like that. Like all of these things that I think are absolutely necessary can be done
There are
only here
probably
with
five. There are probably
yeah,
five that I would list.
right.
I would probably live in Monaco just because they're so rich. As long as I can afford to. But Monaco, tiny little, no taxes there, right? They're so wealthy that they don't have any taxation. That's why France hates them so much. Switzerland, everybody loves Switzerland. I would live in Japan. But they have remodeled their government and their society by America, right? And so the American influence is very strong there. Capitalism, and
Singapore, maybe?
and probably Bermuda,
Bermuda.
just because it's close to the U.S. and the weather's nice, you know.
What about Singapore? Singapore's kind of sort of close in a way.
Singapore Though Singapore is, so they definitely their agreement was to surrender some of their civil liberties because they were all dying of malaria in a swamp, right? And they gave up some things, and it was a way to achieve that. Now you can do that with a very small population. Now they're getting to a point where maybe they've achieved so much they can start doing stuff. But Singapore is an interesting idea. We can maybe talk about that experiment as well, because that's a
at some point.
But
yeah,
it's not a population as diverse and as large geographically. You know, there are things where you can govern in a very small area with it's so different over very large.
That's one of the key things that people I encourage everybody to consider too, because it's like, no matter, if you're looking at different forms of government and different economic systems, like, I'm a person who plays Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you guys out there in the audience play Dungeons and Dragons, but I'll just let you know that basically all of the forms of government and all the economic systems work in like a 5-man D&D party, right? Like, it's really easy. If you expand that out to 100, still most of them work. If you expand it out to 1,000, a couple of them drop off the list. If you expand it out to 100,000, a couple more. But the point is, once you get to like 50 million, there's really only like 10, 5 or 6 different systems that can even possibly manage that number of people, and most of them aren't very good, right? Like, most of them are in the situation where you basically have to sacrifice, So one of the big things that I keep telling people, and I keep coming back to this, and I apologize, sounded like a parrot, right, or a broken record, but under America, with a decentralized government, you can house every other government structure, basically, with the exception of like a few really, really extreme, like neo-Nazism maybe doesn't work, or, a couple of them like that, like with like really, really violent tendencies. Aside from that, like, if you want to have a communist zone, you can have, there's plenty of communes in America. If you want to have a socialist, union, if you want to have like places that are more authoritarian, you can have those like in a local zone. But what you can't do is flip it. You can't have the authoritarian regime be at the top or the communist regime be at the top and then sneak in like a free market capitalist zone in the side. That just doesn't work. So if there's
try doing that, and they just made their whole country capitalist with single party rule.
Right. See, Tommy Gunn says he's living on Chinese rock. I don't even know what Chinese rock is, but yeah. So like, if you get to the point where if you had to choose one, right? If you had to choose a global system to like manage all the system, the only thing that would manage it, the only country that I can see that would manage it is the American system. And honestly, not even really anymore. Like, it needs to be American system, like circa 50s or something, like. But
there's definitely have been some warping things, and the war on terror. Are we ever going to pull back from the Patriot Act? Right?
Please.
Right?
I wish we would.
And the end of the Patriot Act, is there time to sunset some of those things? Those are important questions that we should be asking. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln took some extreme measures, but when the war was done, he walked those all back. One of the big things is like power grabs is so much of the government is reluctant to give back power once they've won it. And they feel like people are used to it, right? And they need to be like Cincinnatius and say, okay, you granted me this temporary power. If you know about the story of Cincinnatius.
Yeah.
Eddie?
Yeah, but refresh everybody's memory though, yeah.
Okay, so Cincinnatius, that's the story of George Washington, but he was a Roman farmer, citizen and Rome was at war. They kept getting beat, and so they came to him and knew he was a great soldier. They said, "Will you lead our armies?" But not just the armies, all of Rome. They gave him this thing that for a short period of time, he became the dictator, right?
Yep.
He didn't have to like build coalitions and whip votes. He could just say, "This is what we need to do. Well, this is what we need to do," and he succeeded in winning this war, this invasion, setting off and saving the republic. And after, they didn't really have a mechanism for how to make him relinquish his dictatorship, but he voluntarily, it was supposed to sort of end after the conflict, maybe, but he voluntarily gave it up, went to the Senate, and went back to being a farmer, plowing his field. And then later in life, they made him that he did it again. Another crisis. Nobody else could solve it. They came to him. He solved it and gave up. And so he's the example, right, of George Washington, of somebody gaining, really strong power and being in every position to maintain it and voluntarily giving it up for the greater good of the republic. And I think that we need to see our government, even not individuals, but our bureaucracy is willing to do that and say, maybe we needed this extra power for a brief period of time, but now it's time to let that go.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, me personally, I'm even against like those temporary usurpations. I mean, I don't even like the Patriot Act like ever coming into play, but I will be honest with everybody. Like that was a mistake I made back when it came out. Like when it came out, first of all, I wasn't into politics. I didn't really read it that carefully, but I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm not a terrorist. What do I have to worry about, right? And then, meanwhile, like when I finally get into politics and look at it, I'm like, ooh, ugh, like this is definitely not okay, right? Like, and meanwhile, like acts like the Patriot Act, Espionage Act, these are like infringements on our civil liberties. But it's like you said, like when these things, the moment you give the government power, it's very hard to claw that power back into the hands of the people, right? And that's basically the case for every bureaucracy within the government. And that's one of the things that Elon Musk was keen to mention about Doge, is that he's like, listen, we put these regulations into play, but once we put them in, they like basically never go anywhere. And we just keep on adding and adding and adding and adding and like there's a few maybe that we put sunset clauses in. And unless we have unless we have the foresight to put a sunset clause in, like those things just keep on getting tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher until one day you look around and you're like, what can I can't do anything. Like I literally can't do anything. I can't run a business. I can't, if I cross the street, I'm going to get a ticket. Like it's one of those things where we need to be careful about that, or else we'll lose our freedoms very, very, very quickly.
Right. Have you ever heard the old joke about how like a mathematician or how a finds an elephant in Africa?
No.
Right. They have like, or how a computer scientist, it's like start at the tip of Africa and go back and forth all the way, and every animal you find, you compare it against, is this an elephant? Like programmers that just keep going back and forth, but obviously like you can still miss elephants going that way. But it's like so programmers would write that, they experienced programmers would make sure they would put an elephant in Egypt, so if you missed all the elephants all the outside, you wouldn't keep looking for elephants in Europe, right? You at least stop looking, right? And that's part of the thing. It's like, so we have bureaucracies, we're looking for inequities, we're looking for social problems to fix. But if we don't get them fixed, it would be like we're continuing to look for live elephants in Europe and we're going north, headed towards the North Pole. Right. And we're like, but they're like, hey, I have the funding to do this. Nobody's got my funding. Nobody's volunteering to give up their job. Nobody in the bureaucracy is like Cincinnati is saying, I don't deserve this job anymore. It doesn't need to be done on a federal level anymore. Here you go. No. People want that money. They want that power. And we need to have checks on that. And I think patriots should want two things. They should want there to be fights against corruption in the government. Right, as a way to they should not stand for any corruption in our government. And they should want power to be questioned and justified constantly before, with the default being it should be relinquished and given back to us, certainly to the states.
100%. Aaron Stotensberg said, "What are you willing to sacrifice for freedom?" So I have already served my country. Would do it again if I was called. Although, gosh, they wouldn't want me anymore. I'm a little bit old and has been of over the hill. But I would definitely fight for it again if I had to. I would sacrifice everything, everything with probably the exception of my kids. Right? Like I would definitely lay down my own life for it. Wouldn't lay down the lives of my children for it. But man, I think that freedom is it's so valuable. And one of the things people don't realize is that freedom, it always comes with a cost, right? And so it's easy for people to say that, like, yeah, we want these freedoms, and then they'll pick and choose which ones they want, right? Like, for example, some people on the left will be against, gun ownership, right? They'll say, oh, this is causing there's gun violence, this is causing death. We don't want this anymore because this is a freedom that's hurting. I'm like, well, you like driving, right? And it costs basically the same number of deaths each year in car deaths as there are in gun violence. And actually, most of gun violence deaths are suicide. So it's like, you got to realize that no matter what you're doing, you're going to pay that cost. You're going to pay a cost for freedom, and that's just part of the game.
I'd like to put in my 2 cents in there on that without going off the gun debate. I think the Second Amendment was put in second, right? There was an SNL skit about it. It's like, what's the second thing we should do after speech? How about guns? And you're like, really? But it kind of validates all the other Bill of Rights, all the other 10 amendments. And even though I'm not a gun owner, I was a city boy. I grew up in Los Angeles. I would go shoot guns in the Boy Scouts, once or twice a year. But it wasn't something I loved doing. I wasn't super into, and I'm still, as an adult, I don't love guns. It's not like a hobby for me or a passion for me, but I understand the principle of it is important, that your population have that right? And because the government saying, I will not take away your guns from you, validates all their other rights. It validates that the government really is respecting freedom of speech, all these other rights that they're saying that we will never infringe upon. They're taking it seriously. And without that, it's sort of hollow. And so, as a conservative, like I think we view the Second Amendment, as an important check on, and an important thing on what the government cannot do. You might not like guns, but the government can't be the one to solve it. If you want to take guns or do the guns, you've got to do something without the government for it. The government is not allowed to infringe upon it. Make your case, make some arguments, and change some minds. But the government itself cannot force on guns.
And again, this is one of those things where this is a right, and if people forget that literally the Revolutionary War, the very first shots fired, the shot heard around the world was fired because the British regulars were coming to to disarm a group of militia, right? Like a group of random citizens, people who weren't like part of any army. They're just random dudes, and they had firearms, and the British were coming to take away their guns. They're like, oh, no, this is not okay. And so all of the Bill of Rights, if you look at them carefully in light of the Revolutionary War, you realize like, oh yeah, of course we have to have this right because that's exactly what Britain was trying to take away from us. Of course we don't want a tyrannical government to do this again because that's exactly what was just happening, right? Like that we were just being like oppressed and not allowing our speech to be heard, our criticisms of the government being heard. We were just had our freedom of assembly taken away. We were just having our arms confiscated. We were just having powers given to the most federal government that was far away and no way to like manage it locally. Like all those things in the Bill of Rights is like right there. It's like obviously this is exactly what a tyrannical government's playbook is against, right? So we have to put these rights in to make sure that those aren't there anymore. Now, I got a question for you. How come we don't say the Pledge of Allegiance in school anymore?
So I have not been in an elementary school
It's
setting
been a
for a
minute.
little while. So my understanding is some of them do, some of them don't. As an adult, it is an infrequent occurrence. Um, when I was involved in Boy Scouts, right, we would do it all the time in every Boy Scout meeting, and certainly at
Right.
all our councils. But I'm not involved in Boy Scouts like I used to. City council meetings are supposed to start with it if you want to go to city council meetings. But the Pledge of Allegiance, you're right. Like some people, uh, right, right.
Like
I think it's a leftism. They don't want us to be allegiant to the public for which it stands, right? The flag for which it stands,
right.
and be that we should rather be beholden to some globalist ideal like the UN or something, or that we should even put other nations above us. Um,
It drives me nuts.
I
I
don't
mean,
think it's quite that,
like, how does that hurt?
but yeah.
Like, I mean,
What?
I wouldn't make everybody do it, right? If like somebody has like a particular qualm, like they don't want to say the word God or something, and they want to
Yeah.
stand to say, no problem. But like we should have that in every classroom, every single day, from from kindergarten to 12th grade. There's no reason not to, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the
When
kind
I
of
was in high
culture.
school, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I did, right? Yeah, like I think I guess I didn't when I was in high school. I still did in my homerooms for a couple of them. I don't know when it stopped,
Well,
but
the very first class of the day, we would
yeah,
do the Pledge of Allegiance, right?
yeah.
And
I
so,
don't know what.
even through high school.
Yeah, that's crazy to me that they wouldn't do that. But anyway, so I just want people to root for America. That's it. I just want us to root for. You don't have to like Trump. You don't have to like every president that comes. When I was serving, right, when I was in the military, right, I had to serve under President Clinton, right, and I didn't agree with him ideologically, right. I knew that there were many things that he at least, well, the way he campaigned and the way he led were two kind of different things too. But at least the things that he was saying, the things that were coming out of his mouth, I was like, wow, that's no way. Like he sounded very progressive originally.
Yeah.
Now he ended up being slightly more
Governing
conservative.
to the Senate. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because Newt Gingrich held his hands to the fire and stuff like that. But even so, when he was my commander in chief, he was my commander in chief, and I was behind him 100%. And I'm always going to be behind my nation 100%, unless they get to a point where they have begun to sacrifice those essential freedoms. And that's the only time where I'm going to end up leaving that thing. I don't know. Did Chauvin? I didn't get to see. Did Chauvin get his pardon today? Somebody asked that in the chat. I think probably, right. Like I don't know that that's a positive plan for Trump to pardon Chauvin.
I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared to die on the hill of Derek Chauvin. I do feel like that there was some miscarriage of justice in his trial. Though I'm not a legal scholar in that.
Yeah, and I can tell you it's
But
definitely
I'm not willing to die on the hill to defend that he
yeah.
was perfect in his actions.
Yeah, no,
There
definitely
are
not.
other
I mean,
fights I fight, but not that one.
it was definitely like there's a lot of like weird cases that have come up lately where it's like the person's wrong, but they're also being treated as like a political prisoner too, because it's like Derek Chauvin's a great example of somebody who is charged way beyond the threshold that they probably like to meet the crime. And same thing for the January Sixers. Like I'm never gonna tell you that somebody that charges a capital is like got their head on straight. Never. But that having been said, they don't need to be in jail for the rest of their lives, right? Like let's play this off. But anyway, let's see. JC says POA isn't required, and South Carolina ruled in 43 that compelling
No,
students.
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court. Sorry, Supreme Court ruled in 43 that compelling students to recite. See, yeah, so I wouldn't make them do it.
Yeah, they don't
I
have to stand it, but you should still offer it. Like the school saying, "Hey, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance." I had lots of friends who, when I went to high school, right, who weren't citizens, so they wouldn't recite the Pledge of Allegiance because they weren't citizens, but they would stand for it, and we would still do it as a class. So that's all we're saying. Like, yeah, we're not going to penalize you or throw you in jail for not doing the Pledge of Allegiance, but that we should have a moment where we're invited to recite it.
What are your thoughts on? I know there's a lot of like laws that used to be on the books, like you couldn't burn, you couldn't melt coinage, you couldn't. I don't know, but what do you think? What are your thoughts on like burning a flag, things like that?
Well, you're supposed to the flag. That's the only appropriate way to dispose of a flag.
Right.
It's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be thrown in the garbage. It's supposed to be burned appropriately. And so, obviously, in protest burning the flag, I would rather have it burned than desecrated in other ways, because at least, right, that is according to right. We would sunset old ratted flags and have a ceremony in Boy Scouts where we would burn usually 10 or 12 flags that had been donated to us, so people didn't throw them in the garbage. And so a protest where somebody's stepping on the flag and desecrating it or putting garbage or whatever stuff on it would be more offensive to me than burning it. But the reason people are just doing that, they're trying to provoke, because they know we love our country. The flag is a symbol of our country. They're trying to provoke our patriotism, and it works. The only reason they do it is because we get a rise out of it. I think ultimately they protest too much, right? It's been overused, and so it doesn't. But it's also because our flag means something to us, and we have these laws about respecting it, and customs that other countries don't. I mean, you wash your car with the Union Jack. It didn't mean anything. It was just what ships put on there so that other British ships could identify them. It was never had the type of symbolism or reverence that our flag has. And so people kind of want to mock that. And it's patriotism is a sort of reverence for country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. Like, I don't see. Here's my thing, right? Like, let's say if you're a citizen of the nation, I can't now whether or not you're allowed to do some of these things is another question to my mind. Like, because I think these freedoms are available to you, but I cannot, for the life of me, think of a reason to disrespect the flag. I can't, for the life of me, think of a reason to disrespect something like the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, if you're the kind of person that just is so negative thinking that you're only able to dredge up America's bad past, right? Then I think that this just may not be the nation for you, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, I'm not saying get out. I'm not saying you have to leave, but it's just like, why would you want to stay in a nation that you hate, right? It always makes me wonder, like for example, Kamala Harris, right, would say like the reason she didn't like win was because America's racist and bigoted and chauvinistic. And I'm like, well, then why would you want to lead us? If that's the case, why would you want to be the leader of a nation that you dislike so much that's that bad, right? Like, if you can't find that love of nation, why would you ever want to be the president?
Well, what was Michelle Obama famously said? The only time in her life that she was proud of her country and felt patriotic was after Barack was elected. Now my country deserves my patriotism, and I think that's a threshold that we have to get beyond, and everybody, regardless of their political persuasion, has to sort of set that aside and try to love that. I think that's the natural. That's the easy way. The instinctual way is things aren't going away, or our government, our political parties aren't acting the way we want them to perfectly. So now we hate our country.
Yeah.
But now that they've elected me, now we can be proud of our country. That's too high a threshold. Obviously there are things we can improve upon, but we're trying, and our strength. Everybody acknowledges that our strength and our strength of character, as well as our economic strength, is what has made America great. And patriotism is an important part of that strength of character that makes America great, makes America the most important country in the world right now.
Absolutely. And no, not only that, like, it's also what's led to our survival and our excellence for so long. I mean, it's one of those things where, I firmly believe that in the American military, there's a sense of patriotism that's unrivaled in any other military on earth. I firmly believe that. And I believe that one of the reasons that America basically always wins is because they know it's like when you're, like when you're the best baseball team or the best basketball team or you're the best football team, like you don't want to lose to a scrub, right? Like if America can't lose to like Bangladesh or Somalia or something, like not that they're not like they're perfectly fine nations, but like as far as military strength, like we have this sense of pride that we're obviously the strongest, we're obviously the best. Never lost a war with you.
No,
Don't count Vietnam,
yeah. I would say that the soldiers internalize their patriotism where they feel like the acts they're doing are protecting America, right? That they're standing in a place in Afghanistan, so the bad guys, they're saying, bad guys shoot at me instead of the civilians walking around. I
100%.
symbolize America. I got the American flag on my sleeve. I'm armed. Shoot at me. That's why we think they're heroes, right?
Yep.
So they're taking that. They're like, I'm putting myself in dangerous situations so that the bad guys will attack me and not attack just citizens trying to go to work, right?
100%.
And so, in a very real sense, that they're doing that, right? Accomplishing their mission, just being there, right, is help making right is help putting the patriotism in place and making America safer and better, and that's in a real sense. And so they see their acts as a way of um, yeah, blessing
Yeah.
America and
100%.
protecting America. And so when they see that, even if they're storming a beachhead or aggressive behavior, they're really protecting America. They're going to fight better, and they're going to be a better fighting force. And I think
Absolutely.
um, that's why that's one of the values that is required to be successful in the military.
They used to teach us in military strategy class and military history classes that one defender, like one person defending their homeland, is almost always worth about 3 attackers, right? And if you have a defensible position, it's usually where you're worth about 10 attackers, right? So like that defensive homeland is something that you have to bring with you no matter where you go if you're going to be in a military situation for your country. Otherwise, if you can't find that strength of will, that patriotism to defend the nation that you represent, then people are just going to tear you apart. Like you've got no heart. That's just part of the game.
You have no reason to be a country. You
Right.
may as well just assimilate and just be like generic country.
No, right. Like insert name. Now, I do want to talk about what today is labeled toxic positivity, right? Because
Okay.
this is what patriotism isn't, right? And I don't want people to confuse what patriotism is for what it isn't, right? What people can get to a point where is they'll like get to a point where they've got these like heart goggles on, right? And they're just so optimistic that they can't see the negatives, right? You like things like the checkered past that we have, they'll ignore it, right? And that's not something we ever want to get to. And I don't want people to think that's what patriotism is, because it isn't. Like a lot of times when I mention the word patriotism, that's the first place people's mind goes to is like anything negative in the past. That's part of our what trained us. That's part of what made us stronger. That's part of what made us the nation that we are, is being able to overcome these issues,
A
right?
culture, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, like here's I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. If as long as you're not blind to the negative things in your past, then you can improve upon them. As long as you understand that everybody's had them, right? Like every single person on earth has had slavery until America was here. Every single person on earth. Like there was not a single nation on earth that didn't have slavery. But
Everybody's been a victim, and we need to transcend that. And we could talk about that another time. While if we really want our culture to improve, the culture of I'm victimized because of my identity or my class or my immutable characteristics, that needs to go.
yes,
And we can see it as Americans. We are privileged. We are all privileged as Americans, and
yep,
but we should take advantage and live up to that privilege.
absolutely.
And I think that requires more than just sort of generically hating America or burning the flag or desecrating or treating um, our symbols as trash. They've been sacrificed for, and they're doing them not so that they can have power over you, so you can be free, right? Freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom of speech, right?
100%.
Those are powerful sacrifices to give to other people.
Now, there is one thing that I do want to preserve too, as far as the patriotism is concerned, and that is, I think that America is a certain number of things, like a certain set of ideals, right? And I think a lot of those ideals are already part of our Constitution, right? That's why we're a constitutional republic. Now, there are some things that you could change about America that would make us no longer America, right? Like, for example, if you remove freedom of speech or something like that, if you remove the right to bear arms, if you remove, amendments 1 through 10, if you remove the Constitution, then you've gotten to a point where you're no longer talking about America. You're no longer. So one thing that I would caution people against, especially those who, for example, see America's past as like, okay, well, we need to just scrap this and start over. Well, if you scrap it, then you're not talking about preserving America anymore. You're not talking about being patriotic to this nation. You're talking about being patriotic to some other set of ideals that doesn't encompass what we're thinking about, right? So, like, it's important to maintain a certain number. One of the things that I see is like there's this push and pull between conservatives and liberals, and that's going to be inevitable. But I really wish that the liberals could admit that there are certain things that the conservatives wish to conserve that's just the core of America. And with those things, like if you change them, then you're no longer America. It's some other nation, right? Or you've transformed the nation into something that other than what the experiment was designed to do. And I don't ever want to get to that spot, but
I mean, the idea though of questioning and improving or innovating, we always want to be innovating, and the times are changing, but never losing sight. Right, a true patriot sees that the country is still great, even if we're maybe a little bit behind on innovation. Right, we don't have the latest gadgets like Japan, or the best street food like
right.
Taiwan or Singapore, or the best public transportation.
Right.
What we do have, what we'd rather have than those things is a structure that guarantees greater freedoms.
Yes.
Right? And then we'll work on the rest. Right. We'll try to make progress on them. But if we can at least maintain those freedoms, even if we have to have maybe we have to go a little slower on other areas, progress is a little slower. It's more important, I feel, to maintain those freedoms than to be ultra progressive. Right.
Absolutely.
Slow change is really what our republic's about, and I think that's one of its strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, guys, that's what I had for you today. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let us know if there's a topic you want us to do in the future. And I know Kristen's dying to get out of here and finish the supper, but we'll catch you next time on Common Man.
Thank you, guys.